Good evening. This is Hannah Klein. Welcome to my podcast, Hannah Klein's Time. Before starting my podcast, I would like to ask you to subscribe to my Substack. I have to say, it's $8 per month. There's a discount if you have yearly subscription. But anyway, please support my work. Today, I have invited a guest from ICEJ. His name is Reverend Barry Denison. He's a CFO of ICEJ. ICEJ is ICEJ is International Christian Embassy Jerusalem. It's a Christian organization that is based, Protestant Christian organization that is based in Jerusalem. Which is built for the purpose of supporting Israel for many reasons. It's like sharing love towards the Jewish people. Okay, there has been anti-Semitism throughout history. We have talked about this on my podcast, and I hope that you could listen to it. But I hope that people understand what international Christian embassies for what the organization has been doing for the Israeli societies, even for October 7th, to prevent further victims. ICJ has made a lot of contributions. So, but before I start my podcast, I would like to speak a little. It is about Charlie Kirk. I was very shocked and I felt terrible, to be honest, on September 11th when I recorded this podcast. And I felt so bad for his wife. And, if one reason I can think of is that, he was killed because, if I say this, probably, I don't know what people's reaction would be, but it's because he was talking about this American value, and he was talking about, his Christian value. I mean, it's not wrong to do it. What he wants to say, he is free to say it. He has right to exercise freedom of speech fully. And he was killed for that reason. However, it seems like, Christian was killed to me. It's not because, it's like, I would say that, I talked about DEI. I'm sorry, I don't like this policy myself either. Japan is probably about to, was about. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's terrible policy. This coexistence thing, right? Because look at Japan. What do they understand about the minority of the Middle East, by the way? They keep denying Israel. and in the United Nations. I don't know about the individuals, okay, in the organization or even in the government body. However, it's very hard for me to agree with some people because, I understand maybe Charlie's, point, he's an infidel, really. If I say this, it's dangerous, right? But um, half of my ancestor was Presbyterian. And, I wasn't persecuted. My family wasn't persecuted. We became Christians to save the life of uh, the minister who came from North America. It was awful. This persecution was awful at the end of Edo period, which is like around like 1800s, I have to say, at the end of. It was terrible, and it was pretty bad, and the villagers were persecuting him. So he came from North America, and my household, my old household, I have to say that my ancestors' household was a landlord, and he could decide what he could do, and he decided to he decided to welcome this minister, and that's why my half of my family is Presbyterian. And so my grandmother was born as a Christian. She was an earnest, she was an earnest reader of the Bible. She believed in God. And yes, she believed in Christianity, like through the Bible. And it was because my ancestors' household was the landlord. My ancestor could order the villagers not to bully him. That sounded very, orderly, but that was what happened in history, in the past, and I would say I believe in equal rights. I believe in freedom of speech. At the same time, I do not like people, banning gun ownership in the United States. Like, I would say that, there's a right for it. My friend has it. My friends have it. It's not just one friend that I have in the United States. It's very sad that, Charlie Kirk was killed that way. And, he was, by the way, he was talking about, Erna Zarutska, a Ukrainian woman. We talked about this too, but during my podcast recording, and the reason why I believe that this matter must be considered in public. And I don't think it's crazy, in my opinion. My opinion is off the road or whatever. And you know what? I don't deny, the atheist or people of other religious values. However, I have to say that the persecution of Christians in the Middle East, that's infidel, okay? they're considered infidel. And they have been persecuted. Okay, their village has been burned in Syria, for example, or Nigeria. In Nigeria, Christians have been executed. Nobody cares. Okay, no media cares. Where is the media? Yazidis, Kurdish people, nobody cares. No one knows the news about those areas. But what these free Palestine crowds care is about where, by the way, because Palestine is the British Mandate of Palestine. I'm not, doing the wordplay game here, but I will clearly say that the United Nations Security Council's resolution, that is terrible. Voting. I understand how much Japan has not learned the minority, I guess. I have to say this. Because, they might talk about, Palestinians for what? I mean, I'm not saying that, everyone in the government body, because it's, government body is an organization. However, I'm just not going to talk about them. It's very distressing to see what happened. It's the economy is terrible in Japan, and well, I'm not going to get into that, but it's the prime minister, who is resigning. He did not understand anything about this conflict at all. But anyway, I would like to you to know about ICEJ because it's a wonderful organization. I asked Reverend Barry to talk about the cause, the reason to devote oneself to the land of Israel. There is a reason for it, and also, it's a past strong, anti-Semitism and Christianity as well. I'm not saying that I did not do it, but it's but well, I have to say that just that I hope that you understand about ICEJ, and the reason why I asked him to come to my podcast is that there was a TV station, this famous one in Japan, that said ICEJ is a political organization for the United States. We talked about this, and that's why I asked him to talk about ICEJ. I have known about the reasons, historical background. I mean, these documentaries are made without understanding these. And what? They introduced a human rights activist who made a speech in London. He said, I'm not going to say the name, but he said, normalize the massacre as status quo after October 7th. He is very famous because he's his favorite in the major news media, as the Palestinian. Like Palestinians, there are Palestinians in Lebanon, Syria, other Jordan, other parts of the Middle East. And the reason for this two-state solution is only for one only state without Jewish state. There is no, I was reading about this and I totally agree, but there is no acknowledgement by the international society that the Jewish people belong to the land of Israel. They're about to be denied. But anyway, I hope that you listen to this podcast. Please listen to our conversation. Good afternoon in Israel, Jerusalem.
Thank you, and good evening to you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to invite you again. I'm very pleased that you come to my podcast, and I hope that you could speak later about ICEJ. It contributes to a lot to Israel, and support the Holocaust survivors, and October 7th victims, and a lot really. And so, but first, I was surprised, when I woke up in the morning, people were talking about Charlie Kirk, and I was very shocked. It's it was very shocking. It's like, and then, the sadness comes after usually. But usually it's so shocking because, I have seen him, speak on social media all the time. He speaks a lot. And, I was very, very shocked. And, what do you think about him?
Like you, when I saw the news first thing this morning,
Mm,
it was a shock,
mm,
and almost jointly a sense of grief.
yes.
Um, know him personally,
Mm,
but grieving for his wife, his widow, his
yeah.
two small children, and grieving for America as a nation that uh, a spokesman of free speech
Mm,
um, that argued in favor of active debate to
yeah.
discuss ideas and not attack the persons,
Mhm,
that he would be assassinated.
mhm,
Um, and it's obvious this was not just a deranged lone wolf killer, as law enforcement might say. This was a rifle shot from 200 meters away.
yeah,
This
I
was
saw that.
someone intended very carefully.
Mm,
Um, and it's a great loss, um, because there are few spokesmen like him who I've heard to defend ideas,
mm,
to be effective, to vigorously debate and argue over ideas,
yeah.
with him never getting angry, with him never trying to attribute personal maliciousness or evil to the others who held the other ideas. He debated the ideas. And that is an amazing gifting and talent. And unfortunately for truth, uh, we as humanity,
Mm.
we as Christians in the church have lost a brilliant spokesperson.
It's very, very sad. Personally, I really think it's a sad, incident. And I saw, a clip of, when you see social media, it's not just, a clip, but sometimes there was a clip of like a rifle, a person, who was lying down on in a building. And it was like a sniper, really. And, I was very shocked because, Charlie, he spoke, you know, um, I think that, in a way that people need to speak. We didn't go get over. He tried to debate with various people. And, I think that it's very important because, in a way, that means that he doesn't abandon people. So, he tried to speak with everyone. And that was very inclusive, in idea, I think. And, it's very, very sad and, he was also talking about Irna Zarutka. You know, that actually reminds me a lot about, criminal justice, problems. You know, I saw she was scared, after she was stabbed. And then, what happened was that people started to get off the public transport. And I think that people knew. I think some people knew about it. And, obviously, it seems like she was ignored by the society. That's the sad part,
Unfortunately,
right?
yes. Unfortunately, yes. And that is a grievous testament to what's happened in culture in America.
Yeah.
I'm using it in a culture in a broad sense,
Mm,
not just the criminal justice system, but the sense of community in a society,
yeah.
the sense of humans caring for humans.
Yeah.
Um, Now, on the criminal justice system, the judge who had released her murderer
Mm,
is not even an attorney. She was appointed judge to have a black female. And I'm not against a black judge, but they should at least
what?
have a legal education
Really?
to exercise the role of the judge. Correct. She is not even an attorney.
Wow.
And that's a part of the unbalanced shifting of
Mm,
culture in America. Um, and after she was stabbed,
mm,
as several of the people walked off, you saw them look at her.
mhm.
Now,
Yeah.
I couldn't prove this in a court of law, but I believe they saw the blood flowing because after she fell into the floorboard, her
Mm,
seat was covered with blood. So there was, and for someone to die that quickly, there had to be a lot of blood.
mm,
And the fact that no one sought help, no one tried to help her, apparently no one called police or ambulance for her. As an American, it grieves me that
mm.
we human beings could watch a fellow human being suffer innocently and not be moved with compassion to provide aid and assistance.
Yeah, it's, you know, even, as a Japanese, I really think that, she should have been cared, in a sense. But, I have spent in the States, not in the way like in the education system, but, I was in a suburb, away from school, like there was no Japanese. I have never actually seen Japanese. And in my sense, I think that, sh her case should be very, I think people have to pay attention to cases like hers, really. Because, this is not, just one case, but it's very important to pay attention to her because, to avoid, the future, uh, this cannot be repeated, right? Really. And, I'm just very shocked at what you told me about, the judge. I mean, I like black people, of course, I get along with them very well, but, I don't exactly understand what's going on sometimes. And, Yeah, it's very, it's just appalling. And I'm sorry to say this, but it's sometimes very shocking, really. But, I have, these things shock me. And then today is 9/11. You know, that is a very, tragic day for me, for everyone, for people in the United States and, the Japanese people on the very top, died too. And so, I mean, it's a tragedy for everyone, you know. And um what do you think of 9/11? When you remember, what happened?
Um, well, let me make a comment before I go into 9/11,
Sure,
just
sure, go
because
ahead. Yeah.
the um, very emotional watching it
Yes,
happen.
exactly.
But uh, prior reference, lest anyone think I am any way racist because
Mm-hmm.
I reference a judge being a black female.
Yeah.
Um, Best man in my wedding was a black pastor. My wife and I served in a congregation led by a black pastor. So um, a person's skin color to me
Mm-hmm.
is irrelevant except that it helped define their experience to
Mm.
get where they get. It
Yeah.
has nothing to do with making them more valuable or less valuable.
Yeah.
Um, 9/11. When 9/11 happened, I was also here in Jerusalem, like I am now.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we were in the office there. One of our staff had an apartment downstairs and ran up to say, "You have to come see the news." And we ran down. Of course, it was the end of the day here in Israel because of the 7 hour time difference to New York.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and when we got there,
Mm-hmm.
the first plane had hit. And as the news commentators are debating, well, could this have been a failed navigation system? Could this have been failed controls or guidance? Could this have been a suicidal pilot? They were speculating. And living here in Israel, and of course this was in the second Intifada with
Mm-hmm.
suicide bombers going up
Oh,
over the city. We're saying this is terrorism.
yeah.
They've got to recognize this is terrorism.
Yeah.
This is an evil, planned intent to kill as many people possible and to spark terror into the hearts of the nation.
Mm.
And then with horror, we watched the second plane hit. Um,
Mm.
and, the numbers of deaths, the numbers of families impacted, the numbers of first responders, police and firemen who lost their lives trying to save.
Yes.
Um, Extremely shocking.
Yeah.
Um, and we tend to forget
Mm.
very quickly. That for me as an American, there was a second 9/11 in the year 2012. And that was in Benghazi when the terrorists attacked
Oh,
the
yes.
compound,
That
killed
one.
the
Yeah.
ambassador and his 13-member security team.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Now, as an American,
Mm-hmm.
from my perspective, I say both of those events are failure at our government to protect its citizens.
Mm-hmm.
Intelligence should have known,
Mm-hmm.
etc. Before 9/11 in September 1, there were flight schools reporting, hey, I've got these foreign students who don't want to learn how to land or take off. They just want to learn how to fly.
Yeah, they
And
were
those were
in a pilot school, right? In the United States. I hear.
they were being
Yeah.
trained as pilots.
Yeah.
And some of the schools reported them to the FBI saying this is suspicious. They
Oh.
don't want to land or take off a plane. They only want to fly it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, it's not my place to judge like the FBI, and not, it's easy to look back and say, oh, someone should have paid attention to that. But even with the best intentions, protective measures failed. And so America failed its citizens on 9/11 of 2001, failed its diplomatic corps in Benghazi of 9/11 of 2012. And, today is also 9/11. And it was just yesterday that Charlie Kirk was murdered. So all of a sudden, emotionally, for me, those three events are just kind of all bound together in one anniversary date.
Yeah, I agree, but I'm not American, but I agree with you on that totally because it was devastating, really, I mean, a person who was, talking, is all of a sudden like, people are saying, he died, and it's like, can it be true? Then, 9/11, I have some people who served in the military, and also I have spoken with some people, exchanged some words, who were, extremely, wounded, and lost their legs, for example, and had to go through amputation. And it's very, very devastating for me in that sense too, you know, and I have one of my guests who have been deployed, overseas. And so, I mean, it's a very, very, hurtful incident, but it just went on for a long time. And it's the Middle East, I mean, it's just so terrible to me. What happened, after 9/11 really, is
Well,
devastating
and,
too.
talking about 9/11,
Mm.
the Muslim
Mm.
Arabs in the Middle East were dancing in the street and
Oh,
celebrating
yes, I
and
saw.
passing out sweets. The same thing they did after October 7th and that massacre. They were celebrating, passing out candy and dancing with joy. Um,
Yeah,
and
I saw, people beating up, the deceased, Israelis, just they were pulled around, in a truck, Shani Luke. I mean, I don't want to see her that way, really. You know,
yeah, yeah.
it's horrible. And, you know, so I would like to ask you about, October 7th, but I think that there is a lot of misunderstanding. I'm sorry, and it sounds very rude, but could you describe the organization ICEJ? Because, it's something like, described as like a political organization is in a documentary. I thought that
Um,
was crazy. Because I know you, and no, it's impossible. I thought.
well, first off, we'll talk about the name, the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem, and
Mhm.
ICEJ is the
Yeah.
abbreviation, and it's part of the logo.
Hmm.
And I'll just address it as the Christian Embassy,
Yep.
but so your audience knows it refers to the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem.
Mm.
That organization was started here in 19. The name came out of the political happenings in Israel and the Mideast.
Mm.
Early in that year, Israel had passed what they called the Jerusalem Law,
Oh, in
uh,
1980, right?
1980, yes. And now most laws can be, 100 pages. This was a very short, simple law. Jerusalem is the eternal, undividable capital of Israel.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I believe that.
Yeah. When that law was passed, there were 13 different diplomatic embassies in Jerusalem. And the Arab League told those nations, if you keep your embassy in Jerusalem, you will no longer be able to buy oil.
Oh.
So those 13 nations moved their embassies near the coast into Tel Aviv area. And there were a group of Christian leaders here in Jerusalem preparing to celebrate the second Christian celebration of Feast of Tabernacles. And in talking, they said, okay, we as Bible-believing Christians believe that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. We should start a Christian embassy to declare to Israel, we believe this is your capital. And so the Christian Embassy is just a registered nonprofit organization here in Israel. And it was interesting, when it went to the nonprofit registry, they didn't want to give the name. They said, no, embassy is reserved for a national diplomatic mission, not for a nonprofit organization. But those founders had contacts, personal friends that were in Menachem Begin, the prime minister's office. And I don't know the exact words, but as I've heard it reported to me, when the request came to him, he looked at the messenger and said, if the Christians want to support we Jews, give them any damn name they want. It's important to remember Menachem Begin was a Polish Jew who had survived the Holocaust and had immigrated to Israel. And so he had seen up close and personal the anti-Semitism, the Jew hatred, which unfortunately we're seeing waves of rise up around the world. So that's where the name came from. The purpose is from Isaiah chapter 40, verse 1. Comfort ye, my people. And it's very interesting because God is speaking through his prophet to someone who's not his people, not Am Israel, the people of Israel, telling them to comfort the people of Israel. And we Christians say, okay, that must be us. You know, we're the only large unit group of people that around the world does support Israel. I love the next verse, and it says, tell to Jerusalem, you've paid in double for your sins. And so to comfort Israel, the Jewish people, support them. And we've done this for the last 45 years with a multitude of practical projects. You know, we've helped renovate medical clinics, dental clinics, school wings, orphanages, etc. But in the last 10 years or so, we have a home for Holocaust survivors in the city of Haifa.
Yes, I sent a small, tiny present.
Yes, and you have some of your material in the museum there, yes.
Yes.
Now, sometimes as I share that, people argue with me, that's impossible. The Holocaust was too long ago. Well, the war ended 80 years ago. If someone was a child, 3, 4, 5, 10 years old, so they're now 95. Our oldest resident at the home is 103. They were young people or even children. Many of them children who lost all of their family through the Holocaust.
Yeah, that was.
And were evacuated to Israel, grew up here in Israel. There are over 140,000 survivors of the Holocaust still alive in Israel. And they estimate that there's that many Jewish survivors also in other parts of the world, most of them in America. In addition to the Home for Holocaust Survivors, we began helping the communities around the border of Gaza with bomb shelters 10, 15 years ago. Why was that? When Israel left Gaza, and this is important, much of the world does not know, in 2006, Israel pulled out the Jewish communities, actually dug up the Jewish graves, turned over the buildings, the greenhouses, the irrigation system to the people of Gaza and said, okay, rule yourself.
Yeah.
Within a few years of that, the people of Gaza, who elected Hamas to be their government, were firing rockets and mortars at these communities near the border. And so all of a sudden, a medical clinic is told it can no longer open because it doesn't have a bomb shelter outside the door. A kindergarten can no longer function. It doesn't have a bomb shelter. These communities went to the government of Israel saying, we need bomb shelters. And they're like, okay, we look at the budget and we can do this in 12 years. And so they came to us and asked us to help place bomb shelters. Since then, we've done over 300 bomb shelters in border communities all around Israel. We also have helped with four-wheel drive ATV, all-terrain vehicles, with like 250-liter water tanks on the back. Because from Gaza, they would also fly kites, and on the tail of the kite, put a Molotov cocktail burning thing. And when the kite flew over the border and was over the wheat fields, cut the kite loose and let it start a fire in the wheat field. And so with these small, all-terrain vehicles with 250 liters, they could get there quickly, put the fire out before it turned into a massive fire and burned the whole field. So for more than a decade, we've been working with these communities, helping their volunteer security teams, their volunteer firefighting teams. Before October 7th, these communities had said, look, we need secure radios for our volunteer security team. And each of these regions would have, 20, 30 volunteer members of their security team. And then those would also be part of the security team of their town within that region. And so we purchased these secure radios at over $1,000 a piece, gave them to all of the team. And it's 4 or 5 regions, I forget right now, around Gaza. Amnon, who's the head of security on the region just north of Gaza, Hof Ashkelon, with tears in his eyes, he's looked at me and said, your radio saved 3,000 lives on October 7th.
Oh, goodness.
Now, the story behind that, Amnon is also a motorcycle enthusiast. So Saturday morning, October 7th, he's preparing his motorcycle to go on a ride across Israel and meet some friends and, spend the day and come back. He goes outside with his cup of coffee to finish preparations, approximately 6:30, and he looks up and sees the terrorists coming in on the hang gliders and the parasails. Because of those radios, he only had 2 minutes to prepare before his communities were being attacked. Because of that radio, he could wake up, mobilize his whole security team. They had the 2 minutes to prepare, and his community was had one of the fewest casualties of one of the regions. And that's what he means by saying you've saved 3,000 lives.
But that's great. That's a great thing.
Praise the Lord that the two were there. Yeah.
Also, you lost your friend, you told me, and I wrote about it on my blog, but
the mayor of one of the regions, in the US, we would call it a county, a rural region with many small communities, called Sha'ar HaNegev, the gate to the Negev. His name was Ofer Lipstein. Mm-hmm. And because of our projects, we had gotten to know him. Mm-hmm. And so in the year 2022, which was our first physical celebration of the Feast of Tabernacles, mm-hmm. after the COVID situation, mm-hmm. We ended the feast at Sha'ar HaNegev, in the school grounds, in an amphitheater they had there. And Ofer Lipstein was there with the security chiefs from all of the regions, not just his region. And we had that year about 300 Christians. Well, then in the fall of 2023, on October 5, just 2 days before October 7, we were again back there with about 500 Christians from roughly 50 or 60 nations. We'd had almost 3,000 together for the whole feast, but as the schedule went along, the crowds diminished. We were in the gymnasium, the new gymnasium for their regional high school. And wonderful meeting. And Ophir spoke again to the crowd. And he said, you were with us last year. You're with us this year. We want to invite you back next year. Mm-hmm. And we promise to protect the land of Israel for your return. That's not necessarily exactly the words he used, but that was the impact of what his words were to me.
Yeah, it's,
less than 48 hours later, on October 7, we're getting the bomb alerts because Hamas was firing rockets all over where the rockets could reach. Here in Jerusalem, we had 10 different warnings to seek a bomb shelter. That's more than we'd had here in Jerusalem in the previous decade. Yeah. Early in the morning, his was the first civilian name given as a casualty of October 7. Mm. And Ophir's legacy, he fought for Israel to do things to benefit the people of Gaza. He put in irrigation pipelines from his community into Gaza. And Hamas tore up the pipes to use the pipes to make rockets to attack his community.
Yeah, it's just...
and I could go on for hours of how much human love those communities had for the people of Gaza to try and make life better, to try and make life stable. And the saddest event of October 7 was that some of the crowds who came through with the terrorists, unarmed civilians from Gaza, were the workers of the community who had given the terrorists maps of, this is the house of this guy who's military, who's got a gun. This is where the gun's stored in this house. This is where the valuables are stored. And they're going through and pillaging the homes of the people that had given them jobs for years, over the dead bodies, taking TVs, radios, pots and pans back to Gaza. The world wants to deny the use of rape as a war act of warfare by the terrorist. But this is documented. During October 7, you have it from the GoPro cameras the terrorists were themselves wearing. Raping, beheading children. One where they even put a live child in an oven and turned it on and let it die, baked to death, while they're abusing the sisters and the mother. To say that did not happen, to say that is an exaggeration, is proof of ignorance and an unwillingness to look at the facts, because the evidence is there and it is available. Since then, we've been doing a lot to help with post-traumatic stress with the communities in the area. The communities were evacuated and lived in hotels for a year and a half. And so we provided school materials, recreation activities for the kids to try to make that situation better. An interesting side story, but for me, it's just a sense of a proof of God's love and understanding what was going to happen. Roughly 2 years before October 7 in 2023, so we're talking in the fall of 2021, the Christian Embassy received a proposal from a psychologist who was doing therapy in a hospital, effectively the psych ward for different things. Very effective in his treatments, but his heart was to treat the soldiers with post-traumatic stress disorder. And he had a whole plan to build a clinic. The government would basically pay the fees that would help him pay the staff, but he needed help setting up the infrastructure, furnishing the building, etc. And so the Christian Embassy decided to help him with that. That home, and it's a very large home up in northern Israel, 10 or 12 bedrooms, and it's for people suffering post-traumatic stress to come and spend a month, 2 months, 3 months in kind of an intense therapy. It was supposed to be inaugurated on October 8th of 2023. Now, because of the massacre of October 7 and the war starting out, it was actually only inaugurated about 2 months later. But there I just see how God was preparing that before the massive need for post-traumatic stress therapies. And now the army, the health services, the government are looking at what he's doing, and they're telling him, we need 20 of these houses across Israel because of the amount of traumatic stress from the war and everything. And so that's why the Christian Embassy is here. We are here to show love and support and comfort to the Jewish people, recognizing that for most of 1700 years of the last 2000, the Christian church was the largest persecutor of the Jewish community around the world. I mean, the church perpetrated the Inquisition. The church perpetrated the expulsion of the Jews from Spain and Portugal. The Eastern Orthodox churches perpetrated the pogroms in what is today Russia, the former Soviet Union. And even we Protestants cannot claim innocence because the Protestant Reformation was birthed in Germany, and Germany was a predominantly Protestant country.
Exactly.
And before World War II had been one of the largest missionary sending nations in the world. And yet in the milieu of that Protestant culture, Hitler manipulated that to the Holocaust. So we're, as Christians today, saying we recognize the error of our forefathers in the Christian community. And we want to change the history going forward. And so that's what the Christian Embassy is doing here in Israel.
Actually, when I heard, your explanation in Portuguese, I understood most of it, and I was so impressed because, I have known about the persecution of the Christianity by Christians, of course, but what impressed me was that, Christian, it's a part of Christianity that proves that, we are part of, we can share lives with the Jewish people, right?
Well, and we live based on what the Apostle Paul teaches in Romans chapter 11, where he says, Israel, the people of Israel, were blinded in part to not see who Jesus was as Messiah. But then verse 11 of chapter 11 says, for the purpose that salvation could come to the Gentiles.
Yeah.
For the purpose of making the Jews jealous. Yeah. And later on at about verse 25, he says, by your mercy, they will receive mercy. And so thankfully, we live in a season in which much of the church is waking up to this New Testament biblical call to show mercy to the Jewish people. And in there, Paul also says, you are grafted into the root being everything God's done through the history with Israel, which is his whole redemptive plan. And Israel supports you, the church. The church doesn't support Israel. Later on, he says, and don't be arrogant towards those. Otherwise, God could break you off. And, you know, for most of our 2,000-year history, the church has had a very arrogant, condemnative attitude towards the people of Israel. Yeah. And that's in violation of Scripture. We're supposed to love them, show mercy to them.
I mean, you know, when I heard, you know, what you said, you know, in detail through, history, it's about, accepting, our, guilt. We have to accept guilt. And then, we show love, I mean, that impressed me so much. That was so impressed. And, what impressed me was that, Israel, like, is, is a Jewish state, Zionist state. But I have to say Zionist state because there are a lot of people. But it's basically a Zionist state, and Christians live as Zionists as you do, and I think that probably yeah, like the first Christian Zionist ambassador is, Ambassador Huckabee.
He's the first American ambassador who's not Jewish to Israel.
Exactly.
So
I mean, I was so impressed, when he was, elected as the ambassador to, Israel. And would you, talk about maybe like a little about like Christian Zion, like what Christian, Zion being like Christian Zionist is about? Like,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, first I want to look at the word Zionism and Zionist. And if we look at Romans 11, and I know this is not for a Bible study, but in Romans chapter 10, Paul references Isaiah where he says, and the word says, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. And he's talking about the importance of sharing the message of Jesus, his death and resurrection. But that verse, I believe it's Isaiah chapter 52. If you continue that verse in Isaiah 52, it says, how blessed are the feet of those who bring good news and say to Zion, your God reigns.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
And Zion is a term that is used in different ways throughout the text. But in general, I mean, one is Mount Zion, which is also Mount Moriah, which is today the Temple Mount. But Zion also refers to all of Israel as a state. Now, even Israel, we have to understand that biblically there are two Israels. There is Am Israel, the people of Israel, and there is Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. So the people in the land go together. And that's what modern day Zionism is a belief that the biblical prophecies about the return of the Jewish people, the Am Israel, to the land of Eretz Israel will happen. And if somebody's interested, where is that? The clearest chapter of that is Ezekiel chapter 36. God tells the prophet, speak to the mountains of the land of Israel. Prepare yourself. I'm going to bring the people back. Now, prophet, speak to the people of Israel, Israel. Say, prepare yourself. I'm going to bring you back to the land of Israel. Now, it's also very interesting there, and some people don't get this. In about verse 20, 22, the prophet speaks on behalf of God. He says, and tell the people of Israel, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for my namesake. Because when you were scattered, the nations defamed me, saying I could not keep my people in the land I gave them. So even all of this, it's not because God loves the Jewish people more than he loves anyone else in the world. God is concerned with his reputation to all of humanity. And he had promised the land of Israel to the people of Israel. And so for his reputation, he has to make that happen. Christian Zionism actually goes back into the 1600s, where different Protestant preachers were looking to the future and talking about the return of the Jewish people to Israel. And it's interesting. Theodor Herzl, who was a Jewish man, Germanic background in Austria, and wrote a book that the English would say the Jewish State. After the Dreyfus trial and the anti-Semitism in France, he's like, the only way we'll be safe is we have a Jewish state. And he was not necessarily a religious Jew. He was a very liberally educated, philosophy, journalism, etc. And yet he befriended, I'm forgetting his name now. He was a British pastor who was the chaplain to the British embassy in Vienna, Austria, Heckler. And Heckler began to say, what you're talking about, your book, The Prophets, talked about. And he began to teach Herzl all of these prophecies about the restoration of Israel. And the Jewish Congress met for over about 11 different years, the Zionist Congress. And at one time, they were considering a potential offer from the United Kingdom, England, of land that is today Uganda, because that was a British colony at the time. And they were actually entertaining it. And it was Christian friends of Herzl said, no, you can't take that. That's not the land God gave you. The people of Israel belong to the land of Israel. That's what you need to go for. So, and Herzl in the first Zionist Congress had several Christian friends there, and he was the first one who used the term Christian Zionist. And part of it was to explain to his Jewish audience why these Christians were here in this Congress to decide about the possibility, consider the possibility of a Jewish nation. So from a biblical perspective, I'm proud to be a Christian Zionist. From a human perspective, I'm proud to look to the human rights of the single most persecuted ethnic group in the last 2,000 years, the Jewish people. And I'm deeply disturbed with the waves of rising anti-Semitism, especially in America, my home country. Protests on university campuses, Jews being beaten, not allowed into classrooms. In America now, the statistics have just been released that the attacks on the Jews are the number one by far incidents of any kind of racial hatred. More than attacks on blacks, more than attacks on Muslims, it's attacks on Jews. And yet they're a small part of the population.
I really wonder, who are who are assaulting in the Jewish people, really. And, I really don't understand, cannot understand what they're listening to. I mean, I, I was watching all these clips. Also, I have been checking Al Jazeera. You know, they're all propaganda. I mean, it's
Yes.
very, very, I mean, it's simply made, but the scary part is that, it just, picks up people, really.
Well, and it's interesting, and most people unfortunately, most people today are not students. They're not willing to study a question, study history,
Mm,
do some research. I love listening. You probably heard him too. He's now an American, but former Brit, so he has a British accent. Douglas Murray, who's a journalist,
no.
and he talks about people talk about what's happening in Gaza who've never been there, who have no sources in there, and he's been there and he's been inside. And so he challenges these, um, I will say, ignorant suppositions, ignorant in the pure definition of the word, not informed,
Mm,
people making decisions without any information. But if you look back at history,
mm,
at what happened in Germany before the Jews were sent to the camps, Goebbels was a master of propaganda,
mm,
and he created educational films that likened the Jewish people to rats, likened the Jewish people to bringing disease and infestation into the culture. And so, after years of watching this,
mm.
young people are now adults and they're like, well, of course we have to get rid of them.
Mm.
And so, this type of propaganda has an aim and an end. And I agree with you at a logical, rational level, it makes no sense.
It
And I
doesn't.
recently heard a Christian um, preacher speaking. He says, if something makes zero sense, and
Mm,
here's an example, gays marching for free Palestine.
mm.
They don't know what Islam represents. Islam would hang them from a crane the first day they were there.
Yeah.
Islam persecutes
And look at Gaza, what happens, right?
much more than any other religion
Yeah.
or any other society. And so it's totally irrational. And the comment was, when it makes no sense, you can assume that there's satanic or demonic behind it, driving the people to do something that is not rational, not human, not logical.
It's really, really, disturbing really to see, the anti-Semitism. And also actually I I actually, consider, back 1970s, I really, and also, about the Japanese, terrorists. But when I saw October 7th, it was like, Irma did. I mean, who's responsible? The United Nations, really, to me. I mean, and, of course, Hamas, is responsible, but, they took over. I really think, and, I had watched this crazy, say, chant, of the student, of Gaza, singing. I just could not believe, like, burn the Jews, like, kill the Jews. They were singing that, in a crowd.
Uh, you can do a little research and find YouTube videos of kindergarten classes, and they're teaching. If you have 5 Jews and you
Mm,
murder two, how many you have left? That's how they teach math.
yeah, exactly.
Have,
Yeah.
have summer camps where 5-year-olds are practicing with guns, practicing with knives. So they are being indoctrinated, educated with an evil ideology from birth up.
It's very sad. I really hope that, it's kind of like probably I have to say that they are really brainwashed. And in a
Yes.
way, they really need, re-education, you know, really, to learn that this is not, this does not work in a civilized society. Killing Jews, that never works. You know, those chantings is just impossible to me, really. And yeah, like actually, I have a friend who lived like 40 minutes away from, the site of the October 7th. He was, I asked him like, are you okay? Then, he was of course okay, but, you know, um, he was quite devastated, really, simply. And, I really would like to actually ask, I didn't have an opportunity to ask about this because I was so nervous. I could not sleep for 12 days. But, what do you think of the 12-day war, when the Islamic Republic, I don't want to call them Iran because they're Islamic Republic. They took over the country.
Um, okay, first, being here in Jerusalem during 10 of those 12 days,
Yeah.
extremely intense, multiple incoming ballistic rocket
Mm,
attacks, seek bomb shelter.
yeah.
Thankfully, in our little apartment, one of the bedrooms is a bomb shelter in the safe room, and
Oh.
but you're getting up out of your own bed, going laying down on the floor on mats and all.
Mhm.
Um, After a while, it became apparent that Jerusalem was not the target, and we see that from all of the damage. Um,
It sounded that way, yeah.
the damage was in Tel Aviv, along the
Mhm.
coastal plain, up north near Haifa, and
Yeah,
some areas, and
yeah.
some down south towards the air base, the large air base. To put that into context, you have to understand that the Islamic leadership of
Mm,
Iran,
mm,
they are Shia Muslims,
yeah.
not Sunni Muslims. And one of the, I mean, there's multiple differences. And historically, you've had many wars between Sunnis and Shias
Mm,
because they
yeah.
both consider the other to be infidel. And if an infidel doesn't turn to their brand of Islam, they're supposed to be killed, which is also why they want to kill we Christians, we Jews, anybody else who's not
Oh,
Muslim.
yeah.
One of the dimensions of the Shia belief, and I can't say if this is all of them or just, like a denomination movement within Shia,
Mm,
but they have an expectation of their Messiah, they call the Mahdi,
mm,
and that he will come and make everything right with the world. But for him to come, they have to promote utter chaos and destruction in the world.
oh, so,
And that's why they have no incentive to negotiate. They're happy if they all get killed because that brings their Messiah closer. They're happy if nuclear bombs go off in the world because that creates more chaos and destruction.
mm,
Uh, Iran has, for several decades now,
mm,
said they're going to build a nuclear bomb and
mm,
destroy Israel. Then they're going to use those weapons against Israel's the little Satan. Then they're going to use those weapons against America, the great Satan.
mm,
And as Iran has been developing this plan
mm,
to end the world of Jews
mm.
and bring the money back, causing destruction, they financed Hezbollah inside of Lebanon.
Oh, yes.
That Hezbollah is so well armed and so well trained that
Mm,
even Israeli security forces says they are not a group supported by Iran. They are Iranian forces in Lebanon in complete and total obedience and control to
oh,
Iran.
I see.
Then Iran also supported Hamas in Gaza, which is a bit contradictory because Gaza is Sunni. not Shia, but it's the old adage, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Because Gaza, Hamas wanted to kill the Jews, Iran was willing to finance them. Now, one of the very disturbing pieces of intelligence that came out of the October 7 massacre and the ongoing war in Gaza, Israel found plans for October 7, but without a date. In other words, this attack had been planned for a long time, but it was supposed to be on three fronts. Hezbollah was supposed to come across the northern border. The Muslims in Judea and Samaria, what the UN calls the West Bank, which goes back to when it was part of Jordan, they were supposed to rise up and invade the communities and come across into the towns. And Hamas crossed their border, all three at the same time in the same day. You're probably aware of the Nova Festival, the all-night rave dance party that was massacred by Hamas. Now, here it is some speculation, but the speculation is that Hamas, watching what was happening in Israel, of course, all they had to do is follow the social media feeds of the Israeli young people and learn about the party. Their lust for the easy destruction and the rape of all of these young women provoked them to anticipate the attack. And so Hezbollah was not ready, and the PLO, the Palestinian Authority, was not ready. And so it was just one-sided. So that's all a little background behind why the war with Iran. Iran attacked Israel 2 times prior to the 12-day war. In April of 2024, they sent away a barrage of drones and ballistic missiles and other things. Then again, in the fall of 2024, they did it again. That one, we were watching the ballistic missiles fly across the sky from our apartment because, again, they were not targeting Jerusalem. They were shooting for the air base down south where the F-35 jets were stationed, which is also near Israel's nuclear reactor power plant. Thankfully, nothing, maybe some runways got damaged, but no loss of life, no serious structure. So Iran did that twice. Israel also heard an Iranian news broadcast where their top nuclear scientist, or one of the nuclear scientists, I'm not sure which one, was being interviewed, and he says, "Oh, we're ready to build a bomb. In fact, in 2 weeks' time, we can put them in suitcases and carry them anywhere in the world, nuclear bombs." And that's when Israel, and in cooperation with the US, said, okay, it's time to take out the nuclear facilities of Iran. Now, because of Iran's air defense, and there were multiple levels of attack before the nuclear facilities could be substantially attacked. But all of this background is also why President Trump from America used America's best stealth bombers to drop our biggest traditional bomb, bunker busters, to penetrate down deep, to try and seal the deal. So something that the world did not, when Hitler published his Mein Kampf, before he ever ran for office and got elected, he talked about killing all the Jews. The world didn't believe that's just hyperbole, that's just rhetoric. When Mao Zedong wrote his book about the perfect communist society and eradicating all of the educated and the foreigners and everything, nobody believed it, but that's what he did when he got in power. When the Khmer Rouge published what they wanted to do, nobody believed it, but millions of, slaughtered there. Israel has learned that when an enemy says they're going to kill you,
Mm.
believe them, and you need to do something to stop it.
Yeah.
And that, in a sense, is 2 days ago. It's kind of in the news, been eclipsed by Charlie Kirk's assassination.
Mm.
But the attack of Israel on the Hamas headquarters in Doha, Qatar,
Mm.
because these were the leaders who planned October 7 and gave them the money and pulled the trigger for them to do it.
Yeah, like,
And
you know what? Excuse for a second, but you
you're
know
right.
what? It's 1,200 Israeli died, right? We have to remember that, when we talk about, color, really. Yeah.
Well, and to compare that, if you take the population of Israel and compare it with the population of US, that would have been the equivalent of 44,000 Americans dying in one
Oh
day,
my goodness.
that percentage of the population. Um, just a side comment on this leadership of Hamas in Qatar.
Mm.
Your listeners should do a little research. They're worth $4 billion this one, $5 billion this one,
From
$3 billion
UNRWA,
from all, not just UNRWA, but even the
all over the world for some reason.
European, European nations
Yeah.
sending money to Gaza, and it's
Mm.
going into Swiss bank accounts, Qatar bank accounts, and
Yeah.
you
You
know, they're
know,
living like kings because hating the Jews seems to pay very well.
yes. I mean, I was watching, an organization that does research on how the bank accounts are transferred. And I mean, there are just, people are, talking, these anti-Semites, I have to say, but they are pro-Hamas people, talking on Telegram. I mean, it's scary. It scares me in a sense. I mean, it's allowed, you know, to speak, like probably, it could happen. These Telegram group could be in the US or, somewhere else in the Europe and like I mean, it's very, very scary. And also at the same time, people have to be aware of it's not about the violence. Japanese probably would often say, that's violent, that, it just is for bomb, like, but think about really, they are not willing to negotiate at all, right? I mean, they're not willing to negotiate, and then, Israel want the hostages back, all the hostages, because, Hamas will not return all of them, for sure. If, and that's something, and, I saw, the Qatar foreign minister, speak. It's like Israel, the enemy. Like, I mean that shows what Cutter is really. He said what he means. I mean, so I mean, who showed like enmity? Israel did not show enmity at all,
No.
actually, right? So I mean, it's very it's yeah it was yeah like I was surprised, but I was like, please, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but evil is gone. And these people used the Japanese emperor, you know, discuss, we are not, I'm not going to discuss his name, of course, on podcast because, that will, people will be emotional about it, because a lot of people have thoughts about, what happened in, after World War II in Japan. But, I'm not going to talk about it, but, they used, I thought because that's how they were trained by the Japanese terrorists. So I really thought that they would use the emperor's name at some point, And they talked about it, at the last moment. And I would say that, the Japanese are much more civilized. Were, I have to say, at the time when Japan lost, in World War II. And I really, it was a militaristic government, of course. But, I mean, it's not the entire Japan, really. I really have to mean it, right? So,
Well, and that's also an important distinction to make. You
right.
know, Japan, it was a percentage of the population, the government that was had the militaristic, very
Mm,
violent goal. In Germany, the
mm,
Nazi party was less than 30% of the population,
mm,
but they were the ones with the violent goals.
mm,
And they could be defeated. You could defeat that violent party and then make peace with the survivors and move forward.
mm,
Here's an important distinction to understand. In Germany during the Holocaust,
mm.
even the Nazi troops had problems with soldiers drinking, committing suicide, or
Oh,
going
yes,
AWOL
yes, yeah,
because they felt guilty about what they were doing to the Jews.
yeah, yeah.
And you had Germans who saved some Jews, hid some, saved in Gaza in almost 2 years now.
Mm,
And Israel has offered consistently a $5 million reward and free passage out of Gaza to another place for you and your family if you turn in where a hostage is.
mm,
No one has taken them up on it. Some of the hostages who are now out, who survived,
mm.
were held by school teachers, held by doctors, held by nurses, um,
Journalists, right?
held by
Okay,
journalists.
please
So,
don't, just, justify the journalists, right? I
yes.
really feel that. Just because they call themselves, journalists, they are not journalists because they were holding the hostages.
Well, they were holding hostages. They were celebrating during October
Yeah,
7, documenting
they murdered.
and
They
all of
participated in it.
they participated. Yeah.
So,
Um,
yeah, like, I'm sorry to say this, but, I really feel that, justice was served, really. I mean, for Israel, like for 1,200 people, I heard a lot of words from the victims' family, of Nova Music Festival, the victims themselves. I mean, I cannot say what they said, but it's, I mean, people need to understand how shocked, the world, these people are really. It's about, humans' mind, having humans' mind.
well,
And,
I understand people who dislike violence,
yeah,
but the only way to stop an evil person with a weapon
hmm,
is violence used by good people.
yeah,
And that's why we have police officers.
yeah,
The only way to stop a bad person with a gun is a good person with a gun. And this is that same principle on a much bigger scale. Also, I hear European leaders, the
mm,
only way to end this is negotiation. But how do you negotiate with somebody who says the only thing they want is the death of you and all your people?
yeah, exactly.
There's no room for negotiation there.
Hmm. Well, see, from 12-Day War, actually, I was thinking of North Korea, you know, because North Korea has deployed a lot of soldiers to Russia. And that means that, Russia and, North Korea, this has caused so many problems throughout history against Japan. And now it's a real direct threat, really. And also China is in a different way. China wants
Yeah.
China is seeking an opportunity. And then, I really have to say, what deterrence is about. I was talking about the deterrence and and IDF, commanders, laughed about it. You cannot just say in words, deterrence, is something to protect, and like,
And deterrence only works if both sides want to live.
yeah, exactly.
So like during the nuclear race between the US and Russia,
Yeah.
they had the principle of mutually assured destruction, and
Mm-hmm.
that was a deterrent. If you started the war,
Mm-hmm.
you would be destroyed as much as the other one, and neither side wanted to be destroyed. But when you have this Shia ideology,
Yeah.
or even this Sunni ideology that to die killing the Jews makes you a martyr and gets you to heaven immediately,
Mm-hmm.
then there is no deterrence. They have no reason not to die.
Yeah.
And I'd kind of like to close a thought on this terrorist attack just Monday here in Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Two Palestinian men
Yeah.
came into Jerusalem, one
And
with a machine gun, one with a handgun,
mm,
got on a bus, shot over 20 wounded and 7 dead.
mm,
Now, about an hour before, and somebody could research exactly, but in that hours before that, Mahmoud Abbas, the president of
oh
the Palestinian
yeah,
Authority,
he's terrible, man.
was
Yeah.
now serving, I believe it's the 15th year of his 4 year term. He
Mm-hmm.
was elected to 4 years and has never had another election. He announced, independent of US pressure, we will continue to pay salaries to the families of terrorists who die killing Jews.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
an hour later, these guys go die killing Jews. Their families are now guaranteed a pension for life.
Yeah, it's crazy. And also, I was closely looking at now, who say like, well, 6 million, not so many. 6 million, probably not true. These people, say, and also Muhammad Abbas is one of them, and he wrote, about it, PhD thesis in Moscow State University. I mean, he is obviously very close to Russia in a sense, and Russia supports him. I mean, it's crazy,
Nasser Arafat was trained by Russia. Yeah.
right? Yeah, but I really felt, yeah, that, I really have to say, and, I have to close this because, I have to let you go, but in a minute, but I really felt that justice was served, when the Hamas leaders were assassinated. And,
I would agree.
yeah, it's for the victims. And, we cannot say no violence. I mean, it's a deterrence because there will be second time. And I was thinking about that. So now, like we have, I mean, Israel probably, will have less worries, but, and also, I think that terrorists need to learn what they will, what they will face, really, right? So, but anyway, I really appreciate you for coming to my podcast, and I hope that you have a nice rest of the afternoon. And thank you very much.
Okay. Shalom from Jerusalem.
Shalom. So I hope that you have a lot of thoughts over what we said or what we discussed during our podcast. And um I think that, it's pretty misunderstood in uh this TV station, by the TV station, not just because of that. They are intentionally doing this spreading disinformation, and they are happy with it. And they're happy to spread this Qatari media, which is also another disinformation. They are, even disliked by the Middle East, by many Middle Eastern countries. But they still care about it. Probably there are reasons for it, right? They have reasons to say it. They have reasons to criticize ICEJ, right? But anyway, I would like to, speak about a little about a guest on Monday. I'm inviting the first Druze guest. Well, not the first, Israeli Druze guest. I have invited Druze guests from Syria, but I'm inviting Israeli Druze. She is a university professor at Haifa University. She has 3 children. Her name is Raja. You will see her on X. She's on X, but she's a very nice person, and I hope that you understand. This is another topic about minority. Ethnic minority, like Kurdish people, the Druze people. How Israeli Druze live their lives. And I'm gonna ask a lot of questions to her. So please listen to the Monday podcast, and on Tuesday I'm gonna be inviting a retired lawyer and banker and an author of Because It's Just Right, Leonard Grantstein. He is a great person. I invited him to speak about Jerusalem Day. It was also another terrible day. It was just, it was a day that Israeli embassy workers were targeted by a Free Palestine assassin. They were, assassinated by a Free Palestine, a man who screamed Free Palestine. He killed, brutally killed. I'm sorry, he brutally killed, by using gun, the 2 young couple, who was about to have a happy life, and he was screaming Free Palestine. But anyway, we talked a lot, on Jerusalem Day, and I hope that you listen to our podcast on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, as I said, or as I introduced on podcast, no, not on podcast, on social media, Adam Fox from, who has been a speaker for End Jew Hatred, the Jewish organization, or, various organization. And so this week I'm going to have 3 guests in addition. Anyway, I hope that you come to my podcast and listen to it. Thank you, and I hope you have a good, well, I guess like afternoon, like noon, noon, sometime like around like late in the afternoon, late in the morning for East Coast, like people in the East Coast, and for Israeli people, it's like late in the afternoon, like 5, 6, something like this. And for Japan, it's late at night. I hope you have a good day, good evening, good night.